clearly a potential for there being a world war. And it would be madness not to have our military in a fit state to be able to think about that and confront it.
Lord West, the Prime Minister has set out a real call to the West and sent out quite a serious message saying that we in the West need to prepare for a long and prolonged war. Do you think he's right?
I think I mean, in a sense, it sounds an awful thing to say that I hope he's right, because I think it is in the interests of all of us that the Ukraine keeps fighting Russia and that this goes on for some time. The worst of all worlds, and it's a terrible sort of thing to say in a way, would be if the Ukrainians were forced by allies and by others to suddenly come to an agreement to cut down to cease the war for a peace that actually didn't give them anything like the security that they actually needed and required. That would be really bad. But of course, it's easy for us to say to them, keep on fighting. They are actually suffering considerable casualties. I mean, it's a real meat grinder in eastern Ukraine at the moment, and the Russians are grinding the Ukrainians down there. And we must provide the Ukrainians with as much weaponry as possible, particularly clever weaponry, so that they can keep fighting. So I do agree. This is likely to go on a long time, as long as the Ukrainians don't fold. And I absolutely don't think countries like France and Germany should try and force Ukraine to come to some sort of agreement that doesn't absolutely ensure Ukrainian security and what the Ukrainians actually want.
And just picking up on your point about Western allies, do you think that there are, or do you have concerns that there may be signs of a fracturing within Western allies, some countries beginning to really feel the squeeze in terms of the sanctions against Russia, also worried about their own cost of living crisis?
I'm afraid I do think that is the case. I think that I think in a number of these countries, people are thinking, "Gosh, are we doing the right thing now? This is no good for our own nation. Surely, why don't those Ukrainians come to some sort of agreement with Russia, stop losing their people, and why don't they say, yes, all right, Russia, you can have. I make something up. Why don't you have the Donbass? Why don't you have whatever?" That would be a terrible mistake. It would be a victory for Putin. We need to make Putin realize how appalling this dreadful invasion of his was, and what a catastrophic mistake it was for Russia. And we can only do that by making this grind on. The impact on Russia will get greater and greater the longer we go on, as long as the Ukrainians can hold out and keep fighting. But as I say, it's in a way, it's easy for us to say that. We're not losing our people every day fighting this Russian military machine.
Absolutely. And on that note, it does feel that there's been a slight turning point in this conflict. The Russians do feel like they are making some progress in that eastern region. Ukrainian officials have conceded they are losing between 3,000 and 6,000 troops a month. The new chief of the General Staff, Sir General Patrick Sanders, in his first speech in his new role, has told every serving soldier to prepare to fight Russia if necessary in a potential World War III scenario. Do you think he's right?
Well, I think that if one looks at the fact there is a war in Europe at the moment, and we haven't had a war like this in Europe for decades, um, and that Putin is not at all predictable, and he has made some very wild claims. He has made some extraordinary claims about what he might do, and if life becomes harder and harder for him, particularly if he thinks that the Allies are providing very clever weapons that are beginning to cause real damage, even more damage to his forces, there is a potential, clearly a potential, for there being a world war. And it would be madness not to have our military in a fit state to be able to think about that and confront it if such a thing were going to happen. And I do find it extraordinary that our government have not actually really seriously put any extra money into our defence forces in the UK, bearing in mind there is a war in Europe and there might be a world war. I think for the general to say to his chaps, you must think about the fact you might have to fight the Russians is, yes, that's all right. I don't think I would have said that. I think I would have just said you must be ready for all eventualities, and I expect my men and women to be able to fight for the enemies of the Queen. But he's made it more specific, and I can understand why he did that.
Well, Lord West, we're grateful for your time this afternoon. Thanks for speaking with Times Radio.
Not at all. Not at all.